Yeah, Alexander Pankin. I'm BasharJa'afari of Russia this week. You heard from my colleagues their assessment. I believe that Kofi Annan's report was very valuable. Though he sounded very concerned, there are encouraging signs after his meetings, especially in Damascus with President Bashar Assad. And now the Council will think of further actions. You know that the Russian Federation has disseminated a draft resolution on the continuation of UNSMIS. At the same time, our draft is speaking about continuing support to Kofi Annan's efforts and his six-point plan, as well as commending the Geneva communique and the results of the meeting of Action Group in Geneva, and further support to implementation of Geneva communique. And our draft resolution, which is familiar to you, at least I saw it circulated in the internet already, our draft is not putting actions by Security Council under Chapter 7 or in the Chapter 7 quoting. We base ourselves on the assumption and on the arrangements which were reached in Geneva that do not speak of any sanctions or any coercive measures. At the same time, we believe in order to make Geneva arrangements workable and realistic, to press on all sides and all players. And we understand that this pressure is not sufficient. You know that for its part, Russia is meeting with the opposition groups. We had meetings today in Moscow. We had a meeting on Monday, last Monday, 2 days ago. Interesting, constructive, not easy meetings with a diversion of opinions. But what we heard from many fractions and many representatives of the opposition is that they are not ready for diplomatic or political dialogue. They don't trust the current government. They would continue fighting, which is very discouraging, because in our view the only instrument which would guarantee the implementation of Geneva arrangements which deal with the further political process is coordinated, consolidated pressure on all parties, including those who are involved in the crisis, including those who are supporting them by provision of material, financial, other resources, and sometimes human resources. You know, I mean fighters, which are coming in plenty from various parts of the region and beyond this region, beyond Middle East region. So we trust that Security Council should come to a consensus agreement on how to help Special Envoy Kofi Annan, and that has not to be necessarily done under Chapter 7. Chapter 7 is the last resort. Chapter 7 is not a very efficient, on many occasions not a very efficient instrument. If there is no political will on behalf of all participants to this large process, then no actions, especially one-sided actions aimed at Syrian government, would be helpful in reality.
Mr. Pankin,
yes.
Yesterday Ambassador Rice called your draft insufficient, and today Ambassador Aro called it toothless. I wanted to know, what's your response to that? And you were in the briefing. Did Kofi Annan, is he asking for sanctions? Was he asking for Chapter 7? Or what can you say about what is his request to the Council?
Well, I mean, the terms toothless or insufficient, it's not the first time that you hear these expressions. I mean, insufficient, I got a positive signal in that, which means that it is a basis, but something is missing. Unfortunately, I mean, what they think is missing is Chapter 7. But while saying that they would not support the Russian draft in its present version, they did not deny that it could be a basis, or its elements could be used for reaching final agreement. About Kofi Annan. Kofi Annan did not ask us to apply sanctions. He just said that the Security Council should speak in a united and single voice, and make sure to send a signal that its suggested recommendations and actions have to be implemented, and there will be consequences. That's true. I believe it's Mark or Sudan who quoted that. That's true. but consequences does not mean necessarily actions under a certain chapter or a certain article. As for pressure, I mean, any decision by the Security Council has to be respected and implemented, and Security Council standing itself is a guarantee that its decisions are implemented. An extra tool, well, in our view, it's a diplomatic pressure, political and diplomatic pressure equally on all sides. And unfortunately, there are sides which are not even reachable. You know, I'm talking about the third side to Syria conflict, which was mentioned during this discussion, and the question is still hanging in the air, what to do with the third force.
Obviously, your Western counterparts, the Western counterparts are not happy about the Russian draft, and Kofi Annan asked to apply more pressure, clear-cut consequences, and a rollover. Do you think a rollover for the mandate of UNSMIS would apply more pressure, would respond to Kofi Annan request?
I didn't quite get your question. Role of UNSMIS? No,
the rollover of UNSMIS in Syria would by itself apply more pressure as Kofi Annan requested?
Well, I mean, no one put the role of UNSMIS as a pressing point. The presence of UNSMIS, when conditions were right, when conditions were conducive, it was definitely positive, stabilizing, calming, pacifying. But conditions have changed as of a certain moment in May, and they became, in terms of security, unbearable, and that's why the mission was suspended. The main functions of the mission were suspended. The mission is a stabilizing point rather than pressure point. We made an observation that mission was created and deployed on the assumption that all the conditions and points of Kofi Annan plan will be implemented, and the mission will be needed to oversee, monitor, help, report, and so on. We believe that we have the same moment now. It's a very critical, pivotal moment, but if we send the wrong signal that the mission has to be dwarfed, becoming almost non-existent, or withdrawn, or there will be no decision on the mission at all, which will mean that mission will cease to exist, that would mean that you don't believe in cessation of violence, in peace, in rollout of political dialogue, on continuing human rights actions which are needed by the Syrian government, which means that you do not believe in political, diplomatic way of settling the situation in Syria.
Are you going to veto any resolution under
Can you speak louder, please, ma'am?
Yes. Are you going to veto any resolution under Chapter 7?
Madam, we haven't seen the text of that resolution yet, and you're asking me about vetoing the thing which I haven't seen yet. Yeah.
Because Ambassador Arrow, Ambassador Susan Rice, and Ambassador Gerald Grant spoke about a resolution under Chapter 7.
You know, madam, we are diplomats. We start with so-called zero drafts, then we try to reconcile, to find common grounds, to come to a consensus. As I told you at the beginning, we believe that this time it's not a time for games, you know, who vetoes first or who brings his first in blue first. It's a time for deciding on future of Syria with Syrian hands and people, and letting them engage. So I don't think we should ask each other questions whether we will veto it and on which date. Yeah.
Ambassador, just yesterday we find out that Russia is sending ships, armed ships, to Syria, and we know that you have a base there. It's not, you know, you send your ships there, but it happened yesterday in a moment of a lot of tensions. How the world should interpret it, this sending of those ships in this moment, particularly moment?
Well, first, I mean, I'm not particular expert on naval deployment, but I believe the ship in that region are plenty, including fleets of other countries. Second, Russia is not sending ship to Syria, just as you said, armed ship. It's a drill which will be conducted. Part of this drill is going to that region, and it has no military dimension, which you might mean that demonstration of power or demonstration of presence of naval ship at Syrian port. And Syrian port Tartus, as you know, it has limited capacity, mostly used as a refueling base and not a real port which could harbor ship or allow other activities.
Was there any willingness inside the council to put some pressure on countries who are supplying, to put pressure on countries which are supplying the opposition with lethal weapons? Were there any discussion to curb that inflow of weapons into Syria in order to demilitarize or to de-weaponize the conflict?
Yeah, the arming dimension was mentioned during discussion, because definitely the more arms get in the region, the more inflammation they bring into this, I would call it battle, this military activities conducted in Syria. But while some were voicing that all arms sales should be stopped to all parties, we did not go into the details. But if you wish, we had this issue on our agenda during previous discussions on Syria, and my country maintains that we have legitimate business with Syrians where we supply defense systems, and we don't supply the arms which are used against the demonstrations. At the same time, in Syria you see plenty of arms used for fighting government forces, government installations, and also civilians, which is small arms and grenades and even handheld grenades and other arms, and we heard of many, which are more dangerous, and they are coming from, definitely by land, from some neighboring countries, and some of them don't deny that, and they are supplied by countries in the region, by, I would not be shy to say, some Arab countries who also don't deny that, and maybe they're proud of that, judging by some interviews. We think that this has to be stopped, but apart from calling on stopping this, you have to have mechanisms to ensure that these porous borders are, guarded and they don't come through, which is very difficult.
Ambassador, how do you perceive Iran's role in the conflict? Some people have asked whether Iran should be involved to be part of the solution, or are they part of the problem, as some Western diplomats have said?
Well, when preparing for Geneva meeting on the 30th, we're advocating for bringing all influential players, including neighbors of Syria, to Geneva, and Iran was mentioned, and Saudi Arabia was mentioned. Iran has a role to play. It is playing a role, and ignoring Iran or just dismissing Iran on some political basis, it's not a very wise thing to do. If we want to talk to all parties, if we want to show all parties who have influence, and Iran is among those who has influence, we need to bring them at the table, disregarding what we think about their orientation or ideologies.
In terms of foreign policy perspectives, how does Moscow fit with Tehran's position on the conflict and how to deal with it?
Tehran has pronounced its position on Syrian conflict, and we're not judging this position. They think that government should involve itself in some sort of arrangements with others, but at the same time Iran is among the countries who is not advocating change of regime or overthrowing the regime or giving advices from the outside how to deal with your domestic affairs.
Ambassador,
Last question probably.
The meeting in Moscow with the opposition, in what ways do you see that meeting bringing the process forward, and what is your assessment of the outcome of that meeting?
Well, these meetings were supposed to bring the process forward because they give you a chance to understand what are the aims or intentions of the parties. And what we saw is that politically many parts of this opposition or groups, you cannot call it a united opposition. I mean, you know, we had separate meetings with domestic and so-called foreign-based opposition. They have a lot of rationale in their approach to future of the country, which they want to see as a pluralistic, democratic, based on rule of law, all the right things and all the right principles. But they also admit that they don't have influence over many who are fighting, physically fighting and killing people in Syria, who have no link to political agenda which Syrian opposition, civilized Syrian opposition, political Syrian opposition is promoting. And this is the issue which has to be handled separately, because if we launch the dialogue which would evolve into political process, while the fighting will continue, because those who fight, they don't listen to those who negotiate the future constructions of the society, that will bring you no result. You will have a society with the banditry and terrorist activities which have to be handled.
Who is behind those? Who's giving their weapons? Those groups that you say that are...
Well, you can only guess. You can only guess. It could be some states. It could be some terrorist organizations. Well, it could be independent fighters who fight for their own causes. They don't consider them to be part of any political group or listen to any political group. And unfortunately, it's a mosaic which no one probably fully understands and can handle. But we need to handle that mosaic.